1990s, in the European market, Sega ran both the Sega Master System and the Sega Mega Drive as concurrent systems. This meant that for a time you could get what was ostensibly meant to be the same game across two different pieces of hardware. But was this ever really the case? Just because a game shares the same title doesn't mean it is the same title. So today we're going to look at a few games and see, is it really a case of same game, different system? Okay, first up we have a bit of a legendary title here. At the time of recording, this game has just passed its 30th birthday, and it's the iconic scrolling beat-em-up Streets of Rage. As you can see, the Mega Drive title's pretty impressive given the system at the time and what else was available for it. As far as I'm aware, this game was built around the Golden Axe engine that had been used, and also featured some assets borrowed from Shinobi, such as the title font and such. Now, you know, everybody knows this game. Graphically, whilst it isn't one of the greatest Mega Drive titles, at the time it was one of the better looking ones, and in terms of music, well, it still stands up today. Yuzo Koshiro's epic soundtrack is still brilliant. Now, gameplay wise, as I'm sure we're all aware, the Streets of Rage games are basically a pretty bog standard beat 'em up. You scroll from left to right, you punch and kick and throw enemies and use special moves, and yeah, you beat them up. Now, this was Sega's attempt to counter Final Fight on Super Nintendo, and many people, myself included, would argue that this is actually the superior game despite not having the jaw-droppingly massive sprite work that Final Fight employed. This game felt smoother, faster, and still looked pretty darn good. As you can see, it's nice, it's colourful, there's a bit of animation to the background, sprite animation's pretty decent, it moves at a great pace, it's smooth, it's everything you want in a beat 'em up. Now, of course, this wasn't really pushing the Mega Drive as we know the Mega Drive could be pushed, but still, when you look at this, it's quite visually and audio impressive. Visually and audio? That sounds bad. Anyway, over to the 8-bit system now, the Master System conversion. This came a little bit later and was actually developed by Yuzo Koshiro's own team. Straight away you can see the introduction is different. The text scroll is there, but there's no background graphic. Clearly that was too much for the Master System to handle smoothly or efficiently. Now, the music isn't quite as good, obviously it's much more limited, but it is still a pretty darn good rendition of the Streets of Rage music. I'm not playing it here so I don't get hit with any content matches, because I have had that with a couple of Sega videos, but you know, it's easy enough to find out there on YouTube. There's a still version of the intro graphic from the Mega Drive game. It looks pretty attractive, to be fair, especially given the limitations of the system. Here we go. Player select's a lot more simple, but still effective. And you go into the game. And yeah, this is a pretty good rendition of Streets of Rage. Yes, the graphics are simplified, there's much less in the foreground, less colours. Animation is somewhat simplified, and it's not quite as smooth as the Mega Drive version. Obviously it doesn't sound as good, but you know what? This is a pretty darn good attempt at converting a 16-bit title to an 8-bit machine, and I personally think it does it very well. So certainly, in the case of Streets of Rage, I would say this is definitely a case of same game, different system. It's something you can't really argue. It does what it's supposed to do, and it does it well. Yes. 10 out of 10 Sega. Okay, onto another iconic beat-em-up title here with Double Dragon. This is the Mega Drive version. Now, the Mega Drive version, excuse me, came out 1992, 5 years after the arcade version, so you'd assume this was a pretty accurate rendition of the arcade machine, and to be fair, it is. I mean, you know, it looks the part, it sounds pretty decent. My only problem with it is the same problem I had with the arcade machine, in that, truth be told, I don't think it plays that well. I think it's a little bit slow, a little bit jerky, and it can be a little bit awkward to, you know, hit the enemies. Plus, there's that complete lack of any kind of indications to how well you're doing against an opponent. They have no life bar, so you don't know where you're at. I personally always felt Double Dragon was a good game, but not a great game, which, you know, does seem to be a bit against conventional thinking, but hey, that's the thing. But as I said, this looks good, it sounds good, and it plays pretty much bang on to the arcade machine. So yeah, it's not a bad title really. Now, onwards we go. And here we have the Master System version of Double Dragon. Now obviously this came out a little bit before the Mega Drive version. It was done in 1988, barely a year after the arcade machine was done. And yeah, I mean, as you can see, it's significantly cut down from the arcade version visually. You're missing a bit of the background graphics. You know, it is what it is. But again, it doesn't look too bad, all things considered. I would say out of all the 8-bit versions available on the market, this is easily the best looking one, and probably the best playing one. I mean, if you've ever had experience of, say, the 8-bit home computer conversion, such as for the Sinclair Spectrum or the C64, you'll know the joys of trying to control this with just one button. At least we have two here. Yes, there's a lot of sprite flicker, you can't get away from that. But it is a pretty good take on the game. And I'll be honest, this was actually the first Master System title I ever completed. Yeah, like all the other versions of Double Dragon, it's a little bit too hard at times for its own good, but I think this is a pretty good version, and it stands up quite well, compared to the Mega Drive version. In fact, I'd actually say I prefer this. Despite the sprite flicker, I actually find this game easier to play and a bit more fun, but that's just my personal opinion. But yeah, it's basically the same game on a different system. Another win for Sega here. Sega! So now we're on to the big boy, Sonic the Hedgehog, Sega's iconic high-speed, high-energy, radical dude. Yeah, very 90s mascot. Now, this game was designed purely as a technical showcase for what Sega's 16-bit hardware could do. Big sprites, smooth parallax scrolling, high-speed gameplay, really good audio. This is a game that really indicated that the 16-bit systems were different and were new and were more powerful. If you were unsure before this, once you saw this game, you knew that the Mega Drive was way more powerful than the Master System could ever be. And yes, as you can tell by the gameplay footage, I'm bloody awful at it. But anyway, this was a technical showcase at the time for Sega's system. It sold an awful lot of hardware. Yeah, this game absolutely is the Mega Drive. It shows you exactly what Sega were about with their new system. Blast processing, this is your example. And here we have the Master System version. Straight away you can see there's differences. There's a map screen, but when you get into the game, well, that's a pretty decent rendition of Green Hill Zone. But straight away you can see, oh yes, I'm terrible at the game, as I said. But also, look at it. It is slower, but it's still recognisably Sonic the Hedgehog. Now, what Sega did here was they built an entirely new game with the same title and the same character, designed around the strengths and weaknesses of the Master System, which is a much less powerful system. Okay, there's a bit of graphical glitch in here from my machine. I apologise for that. I used emulation to grab this. It caused a bit of a glitch. But yeah, you know, yes, it doesn't look as good. Yes, it doesn't sound as good. But this is a game tailored to the Master System, which, to be fair, Sonic the Hedgehog needed to be. You could never have done Sonic the Hedgehog as it was on the Mega Drive on the Master System. It just wouldn't have worked. The Z80 CPU wasn't powerful enough, the graphics chip wasn't powerful enough, so you had to have something custom. And you know what? This is a good game. In its own way, in fact, I would say that this is just as good, if not better in some respects, than the Mega Drive game. Whereas the Mega Drive game gives you Sonic Super Speed at limited parts of the title, this game does allow you to be Sonic speeding around, but it also balances itself out, and it balances, I think, the platforming sections better. So, same game, different system? No. Sonic for the Master System is a completely different kettle of fish. It's more of a Mario style platformer than the Mega Drive version, but that's no bad thing. So there you go, folks. That's 3 games for the Sega Mega Drive and Sega Master System which shared a title but weren't necessarily the same game on each system. Now, what conclusions can we draw from this? Well, Sega's little 8-bit underdog certainly could handle some types of games such as beat 'em ups, which are a bit more slow paced, but when it came to the faster titles such as Sonic the Hedgehog, decisions had to be made which created a different yet similar game. Now, if you've enjoyed this video or any of my other videos, please do hit like and subscribe. If you really want to reward me, there is a Ko-fi link down below. Buy me a coffee. I'm not going to complain. And until next time, this is Rob saying so long.